Hello, Melinda. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I think, we're into 2.5 weeks of this now for me, since I got home.
Mhm.
As my husband and I were talking, it seems like Groundhog Day, which is you
Exactly.
just keep
Yeah.
doing the same things over and over
Yeah.
again and trying to cope. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to chat today because if I'm feeling that way, I'm sure many people out there are feeling that way.
Right. So just to bring our people who are be tuning in, I'm here, Dean Boles with Swim Ontario, but I'm here with Melinda Harrison, who is a coach, an author, an Olympian, who has done a lot of research in around what is a high performance athlete and talking about personal best, but also your personal next. And she has we're going to be able to push out a great series of tools and pieces that will help us manage through this time. We started with an introduction the other day. And then we followed up with an exercise, the athlete DNA. And some of my staff have done that, and it's quite interesting. I haven't done mine yet, but I'm going to. And so we're on to our next series, our third series. So welcome, Melinda. Thank you again for making time for us, and we look forward to what we can learn today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to help. So let's jump into the deck I did because I think, it's important to look at some research.
Yeah.
So I think when I was thinking about what would be the best thing to share this week, it really is about the relationship of high performance, joy, and fear. And they're interrelated. And of course, we know this is Olympic trial week.
Yeah.
And there are many of us. I mean, I was going as a spectator. Coaches have been preparing for this for 4 years. The swimmers were so looking forward to taper, as I so remember. And, you know, it's deep inside, there's got to be a letdown. And so I really wanted to talk about understanding that letdown and how to mitigate some of that. Okay, so the first thing is to really understand the mindset. And while we hear about mindsets all the time, I think this definition by Stephanie Faye Frank, and I'm using three different researchers in this, scientists in this presentation. So these aren't my words, but I feel they're so applicable to the high performance athlete. So a mindset is a person's attitude towards something. It influences how a person responds to events and people. It's like the filter or lens in which you look at the world, yourself, and others. It's also like a muscle in the sense that the more you get used to it, the stronger it gets. The less you use it, the weaker it gets. So why do I love this definition? I think athletes can relate to this muscle metaphor really well because we know that when we use certain muscles, they get strong. And when we don't use muscles, they get weak. And in this particular case, I'm not necessarily talking about physical muscles.
Exactly. And when I read this, Melinda, I really like that reference to uh, building it and being stronger, because I think this is part of what our thinking is how to help us through a point, but also how we can make ourselves better when we come out on the other side of this, and as we proceed through the few seasons that are ahead of us. That this is the area that I think is an area that hasn't been addressed, maybe in what we need. And here's a perfect opportunity to actually take full control of a situation and make ourselves better for just get through now, but also tomorrow. And I read something also during times like this. Sometimes it's 95% mindset, 5% strategy, and obviously those numbers will flip around a little bit. But it was interesting when you brought up mindset.
Yeah. And, when it comes to standing up on the block, it's mindset. You've done the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to build right now, build those muscles that we can right now so that when the competitions start up again, you've got an extra set of tools in your toolbox.
Absolutely. I think this is critical.
So I just want to talk about high performance pursuits. And this is in a personal best as well as a personal next. That as an athlete, you're an expert, or you gain expertise, and those at the very top are considered experts. Same with coaches. Coaches work through a system of education and experiences, and eventually they become an expert, not necessarily in a narrow vertical for coaches, but certainly for swimmers. Their whole life is revolved around this idea of becoming really great in a particular sport. And so when you're around these same people day in and day out, what happens is that your mindset is exposed to the same stimuli. And having that same stimuli over and over again develops these well-worn neural pathways. So for a large percentage of athletes, from early childhood, this athlete-specific world is shaped by the greater world of sports, and it includes what happens in those environments. And these influences become imprinted in the mind and in the body of the athlete. And that's how the athletic DNA really happens. So we're tying it a little bit back to last week. One of the things we talked about briefly was the dark side of a strength. So this is a wonderful strength, but it also can shift to a dark side, because what you don't know, you don't know.
That's right.
And so today I'm trying to give you a little bit more information on something that you might not be aware of. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you covered the hot points. And I think the biggest thing is this is again, I think part of the whole reflection process that I think that some of us are probably really good at, and some of us haven't really experienced the value of it. And I think this is the pieces. And I think you bringing these points out really will help both coaches and athletes and any of the volunteers and officials that we have in play in the sport of swimming. It can help them. They'll choose their way of how it's going to help them. But I think if they take the pause, the moment to try and work through it. This is an interesting one. I heard a story the other day where a teacher said this is the perfect time for children to actually start journaling, because it will have the greatest impact as we move forward and over a lifetime. And so these are all the part of the tools that you're providing for us, Melinda, and really appreciative of it.
Great. Okay. So I love this little diagram.
I do too. I went, oh my gosh, a picture says 1,000 words, and just, putting things into context is quite good.
Yeah. So do we as high performers stop and think about joy, or do we tend to focus on the pursuit of success? And I know for myself, and this is an individual question, I know for myself, like head down, all in, figure it out, keep going. And, I've had to talk about building muscles. I've had to learn how to build that savoring or that joy or that reflection period into my life. Because again, as I mentioned last week, efficiency is a great strength of mine. But, in the efficiency, I don't stop and reflect. And so, over the course of the last 10 years, I've really worked hard at stopping and reflecting. And I call them jolts of joy. We're going to get into that in a little bit. How about you?
Well, no, I think a lot of the time I've always been one sometimes, and I learned something valuable a long time ago from one of my mentors, is that sometimes we when we ask ourselves, why didn't we perform well, or why this didn't go the way we thought it was, we always have the answers, quick answers on that sometimes, and we dwell a lot. But sometimes you have to, the harder question sometimes the answer is, why did it go well?
Right.
And that whole reflection piece, and even through the process that we're going through right now, is that we have to take a pause and say, hey, we're doing some things really, really well. And and just take that and focus in on that and actually take joy that we're
Right.
actually doing some things really well.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so the next slide, how does fear play in this equation?
Hmm.
So you look at that picture there and you go back 60 million years ago, a long, 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 long time ago. And the whole idea of life a long, long time ago was that you survived
Yeah.
and that you could repopulate your species. So you needed food, you needed shelter, and you needed sex. And those were the three things that you needed to have in order to survive.
Mhm.
And if the saber-toothed tiger was coming at you, then you either decided you were going to kill it, run away from it, or freeze.
Mhm.
And if you froze, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So Dr. Rick Hansen is my go-to expert on this, and I have a quote from him coming up. But I think, in this particular diagram, it's like one guy's going to die and two are running away.
Yeah.
And, this is that amygdala hijack. And understanding what an amygdala hijack is, it's a scientific, it's a brain process, but understanding that the brain doesn't distinguish between an emotional threat and a physical threat. And that is because of the evolution that for many, 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 many millennials, that's not many, 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 many years. I was thinking, what's 1,000 years? But anyway, so
Yeah.
the brain doesn't really, it was about survival. It's only been in the last, 100 years, and not even that, that we've been able to figure out survival for most of us. And so, the brain hasn't adapted. So it still feels a threat, whether it's emotional or physical. And it creates this chemical reaction in the brain for flight, fight, or freeze. And a lot of people don't know that. They just don't know that the brain has this reaction with emotional threats. So, if you think about the threat that just happened to our athletes and our coaches, it's like we're worried about catching COVID-19. That's a
Mhm.
threat. We're worried about being around other people. We're worried about staying fit. We're worried about what other people around the world are doing. Are they swimming in China? We don't know. Well, maybe somebody does. I don't know. We're worried that our routines have been disrupted. We've been on this autopilot of, if you're in school, you get up, you practice, you go to school, you eat, you go to practice, you come home, you eat, and you do your homework. And all that has been disrupted. And when our routines get disrupted, it's a threat to us because it's uncertainty. And then what about our dreams and our events? And these are just some examples that have created this emotional anxiety. So I think it's just so important to understand that the anxiety is coming because you feel threatened. And, so what do? You fight, flight, or freeze. And so for athletes, are you fighting it? Are you running away from it? Or are you not able to put one foot in front of the other?
I think I think your picture again says a lot. I think the words that are behind this says a lot. I think reflecting on the right now is definitely is hitting the most appropriate at the most appropriate time for sure. I think one of the things that I've said all along through this and is that there will be lessons learned. I think and things will be different and different in the short term, different in the long term. But I do believe that good things are going to come out come out of this, and I think we may find out that we may train in a different manner. We may take breaks in a different manner. We will, refresh and reboot in a different manner. And
Right.
I think what this does, Melinda, is it actually, if we take time and actually reflect and actually journal some of this stuff. This may
Right.
help us individually, but as sport leaders and organizations and communities, imagine this is part of the recovery plan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this is
no, it is for sure.
this is good.
And you have to, when you look at those threats right now, I have a great exercise called True Not True. And on one side of the continuum is true facts, and on the other side of the continuum is things you're telling yourself, the story you tell yourself,
Right.
but the story isn't true. And a lot of these things are stories we're telling ourselves because you're doing all the right things. You are training at home as best you can. You're creating a new routine. You're adjusting your dreams to reflect, a year from now. Yeah, events are being canceled, but they're going to be rescheduled. So even though it's creating anxiety because of the fight, flight, or freeze, when you really sit down and look at it, it's more in the continuum of, okay, I can cope with this because the story I'm telling myself of how anxious I am is really not that true.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is by Dr. Rick Hanson. Anybody who, you can Google him, he's amazing. He's out of San Francisco. He's written a bunch of books, but he also does some great webinars and some really interesting stuff. So I'm going to read the quote. Be mindful of the degree to which your brain is wired to make you afraid, wired so that you walk around with an ongoing trickle of anxiety, a flood for some, to keep you on alert, as well as wired to zoom in on any apparent bad news in a large stream of information. Fixing on a casual aside from a family member or a coworker, to tune out or de-emphasize reassuring great news, and to keep thinking about the one thing that was negative in a day. When 100 other small things happen, 99% of them which were neutral or positive. So we have this built-in negativity bias. And it's been proven by scientists, as we'll see on the next slide. I referenced Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work out of University of North Carolina, which again was groundbreaking. But we have to first be aware. You can't do anything until you're aware that we're naturally programmed to look for the negative. And that's because of this, survival. So then here's Dr. Fredrickson's work. And she has this theory of, she's proven this theory of the positivity ratio. And you can take her little test online. But what it does is tell you how many positive events do you need in your life to negate a negative event. And you're going to be shocked. The average is 4. 4 positive events. So if you have a bad experience in something, or if somebody yells at you or gives you, threatens you, you need at least 4 positive events to negate that.
Wow. And
it goes up to 7 or 8 or 9, depending on the mindset you have. So again, if you're in a negative environment, your mindset is going to be exposed to that, which is going to create those neural pathways, which tend to make you focus on the negative. So that's why it's so important to understand positive emotions. So joy, gratitude, gratefulness, or giving to people, they all create these actions and ideas and social bonds. And so what Dr. Fredrickson says is when people experience positive emotions, their minds broaden and they open up to new possibilities and ideas. So positive emotions opens you up. At the same time, the positive emotions help people build their personal well-being resources. ranging from physical resources, intellectual resources, and social resources. This is the most fascinating thing about this. So the building part of this theory is tied to the findings that these resources are durable and can be drawn upon in later moments in different emotional states to maintain well-being.
Wow. How in tune is that during this time?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's so important to look for something that is positive and write it out. The more you can make that motor skill of writing connect with the emotional being, the stronger that bond is. And you know, the what she was able to prove in her lab is that individuals who had worked with this idea of broadening positive emotions, they were able to use those emotions later on.
Hmm.
Another
I think
interesting.
and I think when I was speaking with you the other day regarding preparing for this, is that you mentioned that writing it down has better impact or everlasting impact rather than just even typing it out and
Right.
speaking it out, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's some really interesting research on students who take notes in class and how versus typing it on their computer, and
Mm.
how they retain that information and make a different connection in different areas of the brain with that. And you know, they're making the link that that is also tied to why journaling is so important.
Yeah.
You know. So another, just a quick aside, another interesting study. My daughter Stephanie has her master's in positive psychology from University of Pennsylvania, which is the place to get your master's, with Marty Seligman. And you know, she was telling me a while back about this study that if you watch somebody do something kind for someone else, you're watching, you're not doing it yourself, you're just watching it, that is a positive emotion for you, observing somebody else. And they've been able to study what the reaction is for the observer. So even if you're not doing the positive thing for someone else, opening a door, it creates this boost of hormones that create that positive emotion feeling.
Wow.
Yeah, fascinating, eh?
Yeah. I'm on, my brain is on pause and on rewind and looking at thinking about that. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. It is true.
So how do we do this? Like, what are positive emotions? What's joy? So for me, I have this exercise I do with my post-sport athletes, and it really is about understanding what gives them that goosebump moment. And the reason I do that is because our mindsets are so focused on what we've done that we don't often notice things outside of that realm of what we're doing. And so I call these jolts of joy that the individual actually has to journal every time they get a goosebump moment for 2 or 3 weeks, so that they understand that there's other things that interest them other than competing in a pool. And they just haven't discovered it yet. So, but it's not just joy that is a positive emotion. It's, you know, giving to others, it's gratitude, it's love, it's being in flow. You know, if you haven't read Marty Seligman's book, oh my goodness, I just went out of my brain right now. Anyway, it'll come to me. Google Marty Seligman, and you know, he really was one of the founders of this idea of flow, that you're so engaged in something that time disappears. That's a positive emotion. It's serenity, it's trust, it's laughter, it's inspiration. Inspiration is a big one for me. So when I do this jolt of joy exercise, like I notice at the Olympics, you know, when that dark horse wins, that gives me such joy. Like I just get these goosebumps all over me. And it tells me that I love, I mean, what I learned out of this for my own, you know, career path was that I love helping people that aren't necessarily at the top, that they you know, they want to figure it out. They want to, they're stuck and they want to figure it out. So inspiration is a big deal for me. Gratitude is giving to others. In my book, I call it tuned in as one of the practices. That's another one that's a big deal. So, take a look at these and ask yourself, well, when am I seeing this show up in my life right now?
And stop, notice, and record.
Right. And so this is in the download file that you guys will get. And then, of course, what I did here is do a little tracking sheet for you. Back to my swimming days.
Yeah, well, you know what? This is what, we record things during our sets and things like that. And this is somewhat some of the athletes are in tune with. I know coaches are driven by charts and spreadsheets and everything else. This is a perfect example of how we can relate to this.
Right. So when I'm asking, going back to here, just so you know, you have the tracking sheet. What I'm asking is for you to stop and think about one of these things and think, wow, how is that showing up in my life right now? Or how can I add value to somebody else's life? And there's no formula for this. Like for me, serenity might be listening to a meditation for 2 minutes. For others, it might be, I had a very good friend of mine the other day say she was doing her church ceremony online, her Sunday service online, listening to it. So that's the way that she gets serenity. Trust is so important. And, how does that show up for you? How does laughter show up? Are you chatting with your friends and giggling about things that are so inconsequential right now, but you're got that deep belly laughter? I watch Annie and Tara and Brittany and I think Chantel and Marnie, all the old Oak gang and the Etobicoke gang. And, they have a group chat every week. And occasionally they post it on Instagram, but they're doing push-ups, they're laughing, they're having this great time. And, that's part of it, is the community aspect of it.
Yes, so, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the end of what I have to say.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been quite, I felt during this, there's a bit of calm that came over me. It's interesting. And things were shut out that's going on. And actually, I felt a sense of calm, and it's interesting. I don't know how anybody else would, everybody will be different. And one of the things that definitely comes about, and we talked about it a lot, or the last talk was about gratitude in a little bit. And you mentioned about, mention the things that you're grateful for while you're washing your hands. Right. I thought that was a great moment. Yep. And I have to tell you that the other day came in the mail, my book.
Oh, great.
Your book to me.
Yay.
And I went, fantastic.
Yeah.
And it lifted me, because and I really haven't opened up the pages yet or anything like that. I'm just still looking at it and thinking it's just amazing, and that we're doing what we're doing right now. And, one, further point on gratitude is I'm really grateful for the staff I work with at Swim Ontario. Right. They've done a tremendous job in the last 2.5 weeks, and obviously partnerships and relationships of people that, come and go, but we're drawing on those as we move forward each day, each hour sometimes. So this has been really good, Melinda. We hope to we'll have this out in a day or two, and then we'll follow up in a week's time with more.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dean. And again, you were you read the original script for me. So I so appreciate all the help that you gave me in, thinking about the book and different ways to present different ideas. And, I'm very grateful for that. I'm also, when you said that, I got a goosebump moment, because, this is a project 8 years in the making, and it was built on the idea of helping our athletes post-sport. But there's so much good information in it for coaches today. This isn't a sales sales pitch.
No,
But
no, and I don't see it as that at all. I just think I really just want to invite people to take the time, and whether it's in this forum or in another one, but I think this is a critical time that I think, or a valuable time that actually we can really focus in and zone in on on values. I think
right.
the values and the go forwards is going to be key
Yeah.
to come out the other side better.
Yep. Yep. Me too. Okay.
All right.
So
Thank
see
you,
you next
Melinda.
week.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you take care. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
You too.